Divinations is any ritual you do to predict the future. And it turns out that there's 18 bazillion different ways to predict the future. I'm talking about everything from burning ashes on the head of a donkey and watching how it freaks out to looking at your belly button to predict the future. That's called oomphallomancy. And then there's my favorite, which is Euromancy, which is peeing into a pot and looking at the bubbles to predict the future. And the amazing thing is all of these different methods, they all give totally different predictions, and yet everyone claims they all work. Now, out of the divinations I found, though, I'd have to say that I think the most popular is astrology, because that's the only one you find in the newspaper every day. So I'm going to talk about astrology, but realize when I talk about astrology, this could work for any of the divinations that we're talking about. So a lot of people don't know where astrology comes from. 3,000 years ago, the Assyrians noticed that the sun, the moon, and all the planets go across one line in the sky. We call that the ecliptic. And then they noticed that at different times in the year, the sun was even with different constellations. So they decided that wherever the sun was, whatever constellation it was at when you were born, they took all the myths and stories that they had associated with that constellation, and then they applied them to you. Totally arbitrary. They just made it up. They're like, that's the way it is. And that's where the 12 signs of the zodiac came from. Now, what the ancient Assyrians didn't know, first of all, they didn't even know the earth was round, much less that it wobbles on its axis. They call that precession. And as a result of that precession, over the 3,000 years since astrology was created, the stars have shifted westward by 30 degrees. So if you were born in the same date, 3,000 years ago, back when it was created, you would have been born under a completely different sign. But let's ignore that. So what? It's not exact. There's some stuff with astrology that doesn't really make sense to me anyway. First off, it seems kind of arbitrary to me that your whole future should be determined by what time of the year you're born. It would seem like your mom's health or the conditions of your birth would be more important. Second of all, nowadays, we decide when to have our babies born. According to astrology, your whole future is determined along one line because your doctor wanted to golf on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday. That doesn't make any sense. And furthermore, there's 18 million different astrologies. They all give different answers. Who can name another astrology besides sun sign astrology, which we just learned about? Right here. What's that? Lunar astrology. There we go. Give them a cheats, cons, swindles, and tricks. Yeah, I also get Chinese astrology, a whole bunch of different astrologies. But, okay, now when it comes to divinations, now, who cares? So what? It makes no sense. It's a nutty, crazy background. But it works, right? How many of you guys know someone who swears they're always checking their astrological sign because they talk about how it works, right? Well, I tell you what, or better yet, how many of you guys have had the experience where you've checked your horoscope and holy crap, it completely nailed you for that day? Have you guys had that? Now, why is that? What if I told you that in about 10 minutes, I can make all of you guys expert practitioners in astrology, palmistry, graphology, you name it, any of those things. And all I have to do is teach you one magic phrase, and you would be 84% accurate in any form of divination. How many of you guys would be interested in that? Of course you would. And here it is. I'm going to teach you the magic phrase, and I'm going to give each of you a copy of it. The magic phrase, all you got to do, grab someone's hand, look at their line, tell them to write something down, go, oh, yes, excellent. And then find out their birthday and, maybe draw some charts, make sure you wear a lab coat because that impresses them. And then look deep in their eyes and say, you have a need for other people to like and admire you. Yet you tend to be critical of yourself. While you have some personality weaknesses, you're able to compensate for them. You have considerable unused capacity that you have not turned to your advantage. You're disciplined and self-controlled on the outside, but you tend to be worrisome and insecure on the inside. At times you have serious doubts as to whether or not you've made the right decision. How many of you guys think this is describing you pretty well? Hands in the air. Everyone, right? Now you laugh like, oh, how could they not be, how could they not recognize this? But it turns out, this is interesting, it turns out that we all have a unique psychological defect. This is called the Forer effect. It was discovered by psychologist B.R. Forer in the 1940s that all people have a tendency to take vague personality descriptions and make them uniquely applicable to themselves and not realize that they could apply to anyone. And he tested this. We've tested this scientifically. What he did is he went to his undergraduate class and he said, I'm going to give you guys the most advanced psychological test ever created. He gave them all a test. He says, I'll have the answers for you tomorrow. He went home, took all the questions and all the answers they wrote, threw it in the trash. Then he photocopied a whole bunch of exactly what you have, those readings, put them in envelopes with people's names written on them, says, here's your results. Everyone read them. He says, we're trying to figure out how good this test is, so please rate it for accuracy. The results were astounding. Even though everybody got the exact same generic reading, they gave it the accuracy a rating of 4.26 out of 5. And in the hundreds of times they've done this over and over since then, people always give that reading 4.2 out of 5 overall. 84% accurate. You are all graduates of the Brian Brushwood School of Divination. Give yourselves a round of applause. So it's that simple. Now, and now there's more to it as well, because that's only half the story. The other half is something that we call confirmation bias. This is another tick that our brains have. What we all have is a tendency to remember times that a theory has been right and to tend to forget the time that theories have been wrong. And for example, we all remember the one time that our horoscope was dead on, but we may not remember the times that it was kind of wishy-washy or not quite right. Now let me explain. For example, how many guys have heard the theory, hands in the air if you've heard that more babies are born under a full moon? Most of you guys, good. How many of you guys have heard that there's more crime when there's a full moon? Yeah, but and here's the amazing thing. You ask a cop, he'll say, you better believe there's more crime. If you ask a nurse, she'll say, absolutely, there are more babies. And yet, every statistical analysis on the long term has shown that there is no correlation at all between the lunar cycle and either crime or babies being born. So how does that happen? They remember the times that the delivery room was nuts and they walked outside and there was a big, fat, full moon. Or they remember the times that there were criminals going nuts in the street and they saw a full moon, but they forget the times that it didn't quite match up. And so furthermore, now, any questions about divinations? Any questions about, and by the way, morally, don't go out and open your own businesses. That's not what I'm really here for.